Hey, it's Ubu. Today we're going to be talking about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, my critiques, as well as doing an overview and a breakdown. Now, I usually play and give detailed reviews for horror games, but I've been inspired to occasionally make videos covering topics that I'm passionate about outside of the horror genre. I've always been fascinated about what makes a game tick, and that's a big part of what's motivated me to make this channel. But anyways, we'll go ahead and talk about my experience with this game. I have a few things I want to get out of the way first, and then we'll jump into it. So I played the game on normal difficulty. It took me about 14-ish hours to beat the game. I got 99% scans. Unfortunately, I missed the Carvix Vine, which I'll get more into later. And I got 100% items and 0 game overs. Also, I played it on the standard Switch version for context. And by the way, this is a spoiler warning for the entire game. If you still plan on playing this or don't want anything spoiled in general, if you're still playing the game, then I suggest you don't watch this video. Also, I'm going to be comparing a lot of what I talk about to the Metroid Prime Remastered just as a reference. While I have played the other games, I have such a vague memory of them that I want to kind of do a thought experiment of where Metroid Prime began and where it is now with Metroid Prime Remastered and this game, Metroid Prime 4. But of course, I'll only make comparisons when it's relevant. I won't try to compare the game ad nauseum, but we'll see how it goes. I also recently made a video about why I think everyone should play Metroid Prime Remastered, so if you're curious about that, go check it out. I don't make videos like this very often. I'm still kind of getting into the swing of it, so I think my approach for today's video should be a little bit more cohesive than that video I just mentioned, but, you know, it's a work in progress. And while Metroid Prime the first game is one of my favorite games of all time, I'm not a crazy diehard fan of the franchise. I'm just a very avid enjoyer of it. There's just something about Metroid Prime that really resonates with me. Also, I've always tried to measure my expectations for games, even if I enjoyed the previous installments. So going into Metroid Prime 4, I didn't expect it to be an amazing, perfect game. Don't get me wrong. I just expected a fresh new Metroid Prime experience, which it is to a degree, but it has a lot of short-sighted aspects with its design philosophy that really baffles me. And a big disclaimer, I'm not making this video to change anyone's opinion on it, love it or hate it. I respect your point of view. I just want to share my experience and my critiques. I think the game is fun, but its flaws are ever present, at least to me. This video is meant to have an open dialogue with you as I share my personal experience. Maybe some things that I'll talk about will resonate with you, and maybe some things you'll disagree with. That's totally okay. I think talking these things out is beneficial, and all I ask is that everyone be respectful when sharing your thoughts in the comments. And just remember, these are just my opinions. Also, if you've ever played a Metroid Prime game or a Metroid game in general, a lot of what I'll say probably won't mean anything to you, but if you're just here out of curiosity, I think that's great too. And I do suggest you pick up a Metroid game and play it for yourself if you've never gotten into it. If you prefer the first-person perspective, Metroid Prime Remastered is a perfect starting point for you, but if you prefer the side-scrolling gameplay as the games of old, then try Metroid Dread. I think a lot of people really like that game, and you might too. Anyways, with all that out of the way, now let's discuss Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, what works, doesn't work, and what could have been. So I've broken the game up into categories like I usually do in my reviews to kind of help me stay focused on certain aspects throughout, and we're going to start with the visuals. I think this is sort of the easiest part of the game to discuss more or less, and visually I think the game is great overall. It looks really good. It doesn't have perfect fidelity or perfect textures or anything, especially if you're looking really close up on things. And like I said, I'm playing on the Nintendo Switch, not the Switch 2, so it's 1080p and it has 60 FPS. No problems there whatsoever. It looks great. It's very smooth. I like the main menu and its environmental detail, the way the enemies look, the UI. The map looks fine. I really like Samus's suit. The missiles look really cool now with their little smoke trails, and you know, you have wildlife and like birds and ants and stuff like that. So all that stuff is a very cohesive visual experience, I would say. It looks very Prime for the most part, and I didn't really have any issues with it personally, but I'm also pretty easy to please with visuals. But this is one of the best looking games probably on the Switch from my experience, and I think that's great. I think it looks awesome, so no complaints there really. There might be a few nitpicks here and there, which I'll get into later, but I also really like the boss designs too. That's one of the biggest positives of this game in general, are the bosses, and I'll expand more on that as well. I like little details like seeing Samus's eyes when you open the menu, and even in combat, where you shoot an enemy really close up to you, the glare from the blast will show a reflection of her face in the visor. So that's pretty cool. And like I said, I do have a nitpick to a degree. While I really enjoy the look of the Viola suit with its intense red, you have the same look with that suit for like 90% of the game, and it just kind of got old for some reason. I just love the way the Varia suit looks in this game. It's so clean and nice. I wish we would have kept the frame of that for longer and just had like different colored plating. And I just got pretty tired of looking at Viola after a while. Even after getting the upgraded version at the flare pool, or for the flare pool, it looked just too similar to me. And I really like the legacy suit that you get after getting all the green crystals. It just takes way too long to get that. And like I said, that's just a nitpick. So that's really it for the visuals. I think it's fine. I think it's totally acceptable. It's not like the most perfect thing ever, but it's, I think, exceptional for Switch hardware and pretty good to look at. In terms of audio, I would say the music is pretty good in this game. For some reason, it feels very similar in a lot of ways with the like opera sort of singing throughout a lot of the soundtracks. There's some cool touches with like, you know, guitar and stuff in a lot of them. And I don't know, I guess I just prefer sort of the atmospheric, unique appeal of the first game. I'm not sure why this music doesn't really hit with me all that well. I don't hate it or anything. There's only a couple tracks that really stand out. I like the soundtrack for Fury Green. I think it's really good. And also Volt Forge, once you turn on the power, it like really ramps up and kicks in, but it just kind of goes on and on and on and on, and it gets a little grating, but it's not really that big a deal. I just think the music is pretty good across the board. I don't know. Nothing really stands out to me except for a few tracks, though. I just really like the music in the first game. Almost every track in that game just hits really well. It's really appropriate for the environment, what you're doing. But I think the music in general does create a pretty solid atmosphere in this game, and I'm going to talk about Soul Valley. Don't worry about that. In terms of combat and enemy audio design, nothing really stands out, to be honest. I do like the boss audio and the attacks they do and the music tracks for the bosses. Those definitely stand out the most to me. Everything else is fine and acceptable, but just nothing really unique enough for me for some reason. Another nitpick is the psychic beam that you get, which is usually like the power beam in the other games, your basic attack. It needs more punch. It just doesn't sound very good. It's just very kind of a weak sound, even when you upgrade it. And I don't know, I just wish it just had a little bit more oomph to it, you know what I mean? I do like how the missiles sound, though. I think the missiles are one of the better aspects of the combat and its design, visually and in terms of audio. And the voice acting in the game is not very good. It's not terrible, but it just seems a little stiff sometimes, a little too like rehearsed, if that makes sense. I just don't think the NPCs add a lot to the experience, and they didn't have a lasting impact for me at all. I didn't mind Takabe or View that much. I like his weird sort of like monotone way of speaking. I don't know why that, I guess in contrast to the other NPCs, that worked really well. And I like View because he's just a robot, and I like that robot kind of way of talking in the game, so I thought that was pretty cool. Another weird thing with audio, I guess, is how Samus screams like crazy when she takes damage sometimes. It's a little too extra. I don't mind it that much, but it just seems a little extra is all I'm saying. And one thing I never really thought about, but the more I played the game, it definitely started to stand out to me that Samus doesn't talk at all in this game for some reason. And I know she's a part of the silent protagonist crowd like Link and stuff, but she does speak, I believe, in Other M, which a lot of people don't like that game, but I don't think people really minded that she spoke. Is that how she spoke or what she spoke about was an issue? And after I finished the game, I was checking out other people's opinions on this, of course, just to get sort of a reference on just the reception of the game. And a lot of people seem to agree that her not speaking makes the dialogue or interactions with the NPCs just feel really awkward and strange. And that definitely stood out to me while playing the game. And I wondered why it felt that way until I finally realized it was because she just literally doesn't talk. And it doesn't even have to be like full-blown sentences. She could just say like affirmative, or I will complete the mission, or very basic things to make her sound even more like engaging. And she's like pushing the scene forward with her interactions, because they like literally are talking to her and asking her questions, and she just stands there and looks at them. And it's kind of weird. Like all she had to do was just sort of give direction to the situation, or just tell the NPCs that she's acknowledged what they've said or asked her or something. And of course, her being raised by Chozo, she speaks Chozo. It would have been really cool to hear her speak in Chozo, just like she did in Dread, like the famous line in Dread, Metroid Dread, where she speaks in Chozo. Everybody loves that, and I think that would have been really awesome. Even if they didn't, I guess they would understand what Chozo is, and I'm not like a huge lore nerd with these games, but it would have been really cool to hear her speak in general, and especially in Chozo, because to have such a focus on NPCs speaking and being a part of the story and the whole freaking game, Samus just stands there and looks at him, and it's really awkward. I guess it's not like the end of the world, but it would have made the NPCs feel like a little bit more cohesive with what Samus is doing in the game, because we're like this crazy awesome badass like bounty hunter that they respect and look up to, and everything they say to us we just stare at them like nothing. It's kind of rude, it's kind of weird, and I think it would have been a nice change of pace again, just to add a little extra flair to the game, just to have her speak a little bit. That's all. So I just find that strange. It's not like it didn't like destroy the game for me or anything, but it definitely made all the interactions in the game feel really awkward. Another small nitpick with audio, this is a very small nitpick, but I miss hearing recorded to logbook when I scan something important. I really like that in Metroid Prime 1. Like I said, I have very vague memories of 2 and 3. I don't know if that happens in those games, but I don't know. I just think it's cool for our suit to sort of tell the player that you've just scanned something important. And it's a little bit more immersive that way, just giving her suit more functionality. And I just find it disappointing that they took that out for some reason. Now I'm going to talk about the amiibo locking music behind a paywall. I think it's fine if you like to buy amiibos and collect them and get little extra goodies in games. I have no problem with that personally. However, Soul Valley is pretty quiet, even with having ambient music. It's very minimal ambient music. But to charge $40 for an amiibo for additional music is extremely greedy. And while amiibos should have a value tied to them, that makes sense, music should not be one of them. Music should not be behind a paywall in a Metroid Prime game, especially since this franchise is so well known and held in such high regard for its soundtrack. It just seems very contradicting to the whole franchise. Also, I was under the impression that if you got 100% scans or completion in the game, that you would unlock these additional music tracks by default, but that's not true. You do unlock additional music tracks after 100% completion, but you cannot use them without the amiibo, and that is super whack. That is so whack. Now, if you defend these business practices, that's all on you, but I think it's really ridiculous that you have to pay $40 more for a $60 or $70 game to have music in a game that's well known for its music. That's crazy. But overall, audio in this game is fine. Like I said, the music is good, but doesn't really hit me like I wanted it to, I guess. Some tracks stand out more than others. I really like the boss soundtracks. I think those are probably the best in the game. And the combat audio is just kind of whatever. I don't think anything stands out, but overall, I would say it's acceptable. I just think I wish it had a little bit more to it. Now we're on to mechanics. This is going to be like probably the biggest part of this overview here. It has good bones, but I think most of the mechanics in this game are poorly implemented or just half-baked. Now I'll start with her abilities. Everything is psychic now, but also the same. So that's kind of weird. I don't really mind the psychic approach, her having a psychic crystal in her head, so now she has a psychic suit, so her abilities are now psychic. I just wish they would have probably went with something a little bit more unique in terms of our abilities being altered. Now, like the spider ball stands out because you have like the psychic tracks and stuff that you have to like make appear with your psychic crystal. So that makes sense, but like our missiles are exactly the same. I just find that interesting. Like I thought about it'd be cool if like our missiles were psychic, that you could like shoot a bunch of them and have them like frozen in time and then let them all go at the same time, like a missile burst or something, or missile barrage. That would have been really cool. But you know, you have your double jump, you have your psychic glove that lets you interact with things every once in a while to open a door or something. You have your psychic lasso and psychic grapple, which are two different things for some reason. I'm going to be saying for some reason a lot because a lot of my critiques in this game are just like, it's this way for some reason. I don't know why. I just can't wrap my head around a lot of these decisions. You know, psychic power bomb and psychic whatever. Everything is psychic. I wish they would have done a little bit more with that, and it's just her having all of her same abilities that she's always had, except now she has lasso, so that's cool, I guess. And I'll get more into these mechanics as we talk about everything in this game, so just bear with me. I was just pointing out the fact that I think it's funny that they just slapped psychic on the front of everything, and that was it. Now, one of my absolute biggest gripes in this game, by far, in terms of mechanics, is the hint system. The NPCs are constantly reminding me of what to do, and I cannot stand it. I don't mind NPCs in games. I don't mind them talking. I don't mind that as a concept. But in a Metroid Prime game on Metroid Prime 4, I don't need an NPC constantly reminding me what to do. Like, I don't know who they expect to play this game, like 5-year-olds or something, but wow, it's really egregious, honestly. And the fact that you can't turn them off is the worst part about it. Now, of course, you can turn off subtitles and speech volume. I tried that just out of curiosity to see how it functioned. And I went back into the desert and I could still see that big block of text at the bottom of Miles telling me, hey, have you tried looking at the volcano or whatever? I don't like that. First game, you can turn the hint system off, which is way less egregious in the first place, but I'll get into that in a moment. Also, Miles explaining to me what fire, ice, and thunder shots do is really weird too. Hey, did you know fire is hot and can set things on fire? Or ice is cold and can freeze things? Or thunder is like electricity and can power machines? I don't know if you knew that, but fire is hot. I just wanted to remind you. It's like, dude, we know. I don't get it. I didn't plan on ranting today in this video. I really didn't, but it's hard for me not to get just really into this. I'm just really passionate about this. And I just, from a game design perspective, if it's like the first game of a franchise, sure, some of this would be almost tolerable, but I don't see how they thought it was a good idea to just constantly explain stuff to me or remind me of things. It's really ridiculous. There's also like a weird illusion of choice at the beginning of the game. So you meet Miles, and I'll get more into Miles and stuff here soon. But you meet him, and when you finally get to the Soul Valley, you would expect that, well, the Volt Forge is in the bottom left. So I'll just stay on the left side of the map. I'll go north to Ice Belt. No, you can't do that because it's frozen. So you have to go all the way across the map, after Miles tells you, of course, to the volcano level, the flare pool, to show up and get blocked by Silex, and then get the fire chip, and then you have to take the fire chip all the way back across the desert, go through some loading screens to base camp, where Miles, for some reason, knows how to operate their technology, the Lemorn, and our technology, the Chozo suit, which is now altered by Lemorn technology. I guess that's the reason why he knows how to do this, and he puts the fire chip in our gun for us, or does something to it so we can use it, and then we can leave and go to Ice Belt. That's ridiculous. I understand needing a fire weapon to access an ice level or vice versa or whatever. It's just having the incessant need to drive back and forth across the desert is wild. Sorry, I feel like I'm kind of going off the rails, but it just ties into the whole strangeness of Miles as an NPC and him constantly annoying the crap out of me. And the fact that the game's pacing revolves around him too. It's crazy. Anyways, I'm going to go on and talk about enemies now, and that they're basic in a lot of ways. The basic enemies are basically reskins of Metroid Prime 1 monsters, like the war wasps and beetles and parasites and things like that. And I don't mind seeing some things that are familiar, like early on especially, like, oh, you know, that reminds me of the blow poppers or whatever in the first game. They all have weird names. I can't remember them, but... Or it reminds me of the War Wasps and Chozo Ruins and things like that. I think that's cool early on, but it becomes an issue when there's already such a lack of enemy variety in the game to begin with. And I just don't think reskinning enemies and calling them by different names is necessarily good enough, at least for me. But like I said, if it was just very minor early on, it would have been fine, but it's just there's an overarching issue with enemy design in general, or variety rather, and that makes those basic enemies stand out a little more. There are Cybots and a lot of machine enemies in the game that appear throughout with limited variation, but generally, a lot of the basic enemies feel a little redundant just because of how frequent you fight them. The ice wolves were really cool in the ice belt, but you see them one time in the whole game, and that's it. So that's unfortunate. And I get that these places were built by the Lemorn, and so there's some crossover between the machines, but the maintenance bots, I think, are in every single level, or enemies that look like them. The Psybots are in every level, and then you have a few enemies that stand out here and there with their variations, but yeah, I don't know. Aside from the bosses, the enemy design is just kind of flat. Now, in terms of just combat in general, I don't mind the dodge that we have, even though we're fighting in a lot of enclosed areas, so it can feel a little janky here and there when you're just kind of banging into stuff around you when you need to dodge. But I just kind of wish the dodge had a little bit more depth to it, had some sort of like strong melee attack associated with it. I just wish there was a little bit more innovation in that regard. I read somewhere that someone said you could like freeze enemies and like dodge into them and kill them. I didn't think of that while I was playing, so I can't confirm that personally, but definitely something you could try. And I really love the bosses personally, mostly by design and their soundtracks. A lot of their mechanics are extremely similar, like wave attacks. Either they'll like ground slam or do something you have to jump over, double jump over, or morph ball under. So I think every boss has something like that, except for maybe some of the mini bosses. I kind of wish we could have seen a little bit more of our upgrades play a part in the boss battles. There's some variations of using like the control beam, or like I said, morph balling to like either dodge something or roll under a boss and blast them with it. But other than that, it's pretty basic. Just dodge their attacks and shoot their weak points until they die. But their designs are still really engaging and a lot of fun to play, so while I have a couple of nitpicks with boss battles, I still think they're a good time. The Silex encounters, though, are random as heck and don't make a lot of sense to me. They're just kind of there, and oh, it's a robot pretending to be Silex. And I'm just like, okay, that's interesting, I suppose. It makes you, I guess, ponder on what's really going on, or where is the real Silex, but I don't know. I did like the one, though, where you're fighting him in the room with the lightning generators, where you get the thunder chip and he like electrifies the floor and you have to swing around. I actually quite liked that fight. I thought that was pretty cool. And more about the bosses, I think another interesting aspect of this game that's also just lacking or different for some reason is the lack of different kinds of visors, which I started to actually really miss. In the first Metroid Prime, you get the thermal and the X-ray visor, as well as your like, you know, primary like default visor. And you could use it to find different weak points on specific bosses, like the big rock boss, which I can't remember the name of at the moment, sorry. Thardus, his name is Thardus. Okay, we got it figured out. But you could use your different visors to find weak points on bosses like Thardus and Omega Pirate, and even with the final boss. And I liked that. I thought it was cool. It added a different dimension to the bosses in the first game. And first game even told you, like, when you scanned them, of like little hints of how you should approach them. I like that detail as well. The bosses in this game are pretty straightforward of what you do. You just attack the weak points that are very, very obviously shown to you. I just think it would have been cool to have visors back again. We just had Psychic Visor that we scan stuff with and have our little hand waving around in front of us, and that's it. I just think that could have added a little bit more to the bosses. That's all I'm saying. Or even just basic enemies. Now that I think about it, you could have had like robots with cloaking that you needed to find using a certain visor. Stuff like that. That would have been cool. But oh well. And like I said, the enemy variation is very minimal, which is unfortunate. The boss mechanics are fun with unique designs. And combat is pretty easygoing in general on normal difficulty. The toughest time I may have had was early on in Volt Forge, when you fight that robot that like spins around and shoots like the big X laser at you. That thing was pretty tough early on because it hit super hard, and you had like 1 energy tank at that point or something. So I almost died there. I had like 10 health or something. It was really close. And when you first arrive at the ice belt, the wolves attacking me was tough too for some reason. I was using the, you know, fire gun or whatever, and I was killing them pretty easily, and then they just started swarming me. And I almost died there too. So those are only 2 times I actually like really seriously almost died. So other than that, it's fine. Some enemies hit really, really hard, so I would just try to avoid as much damage as you can, obviously, and health pickups are pretty frequent even in boss battles. So there's that. Now I'm going to talk about the beams that you get, or the shots that you get is what they're called. And I don't mind that they essentially work as a different kind of missile. I actually thought that was kind of cool. But I strongly dislike having to return to base every single time to use my new beam or my new shot. I was under the impression that Samus's suit could adapt to alien technology. So why do we need Miles to do it for us? It's weird. I just don't get it. Obviously, they need him to have something to do in the game for some reason, even though he already just constantly yaps in my ear. I don't know why that's not enough. He's our guide. Why do I need to drive across the desert every time I get an upgrade? Oh, and by the way, when you get an upgrade, you go back to the Soul Valley, it will remind you that he can put it in your suit, he can upgrade your suit with the chip, and then it'll mark the base camp on your map again, like you can't remember where it is. Base camp doesn't move. It's in the same place at the beginning of the game. It tells you where base camp is every time you need to return there. But we all know why. They wanted us to constantly go back across the desert, and that's because of the green crystals, which I'll definitely get into in a moment. Also, speaking of the shots, I felt like they were kind of underutilized in the grand scheme of things. They're mostly just used to unlock doors, and they're not encouraged to use in combination necessarily. Like, they do damage in different ways. That's basically what's different about them. And the supercharged thunder shot is probably by far the best attack in the game because it's channeled. You charge it all the way up, and once it fires, it's like a beam that channels in front of you, and anything it touches, it does damage to, and like arcs lightning between them. It's super strong. So most people would agree that that's just probably the best thing to use. Like once you get the thunder shot, just use that most of the time. Especially just the basic thunder shot also arcs electricity between enemies. It's especially good for killing the war wasp nests that are on the walls. You just shoot them with a thunder shot and it just arcs between them all and kills them all. So it has a lot of function there. Now, of course, the fire shot does damage over time by lighting enemies on fire. I don't know. There was nothing that really stood out to me that it's like, this requires me to use this shot against this enemy. Maybe the strengths of the shots are more apparent in hard mode. I'm not really sure. I haven't played it. And for example, in Metroid Prime Remastered, you had unique space pirates that were different colors from orange, red, white, and purple for each of your beams. So you had to use the appropriate beam to kill them. If it was a purple space pirate, I forget what they're called, power pirates or something, you had to use the wave beam on a purple one or the ice beam on a white one, etc. And I don't think there was a single enemy in this game with that design, which is unfortunate. Now, there's some functionality with like the little crawly things that explode and flare pool. Freezing those to kill them is the best way to do that. Like where the exploding grievers, you freeze those so they don't blow up and kill you. I like that, but they aren't like solely unique enemies where it's like only the ice beam can kill them or only the thunder shot can kill them or whatever. You know what I'm trying to say? And of course, you can infer that enemies in Fury Green and Ice Belt are weak to fire or machines are weak to thunder, but I would like to have seen enemies specifically designed for us to use different shots against. Of course, you also have the control beam, which I haven't talked about all that much. There are couple of enemies, maybe one enemy that's like specific to the control beam. It's the orb in Volt Forge that's got the swarm around it and like the 3 energy balls that connect into like this triangle. Those enemies are super annoying, by the way. I cannot stand them. You only fight a couple of them, but I just don't like them at all. But I do like at least that the control beam is used to hit all 3 of their little energy balls at the same time, so that way you can damage the core. I think that's a cool concept, but I don't think it was utilized enough throughout the game. And there are some bosses you can use the control beam against, especially in Flare Pool, but I don't know. I just think the shots are just kind of whatever. You get them, you use them mostly to unlock stuff, and you can just, I guess, use whichever one's your favorite, because eventually you get so much ammo with them, it's kind of crazy. Like I said, it's just a nitpick that I wish there were enemies specifically designed for the shots. But enough about that. I'm going to talk about Viola now. The bike, which I think is all right. It has smooth controls and pretty solid sound design. However, Soul Valley, being its place of function, if that makes sense, could have been refined in so many ways, since it's clearly a key aspect of the game. It would have been just really cool to see like tracks, like in the tutorial area in Volt Forge, that maybe you find stations for to unlock, that then you could connect across the map to give some sort of evolution to Soul Valley, additional functionality for Viola. Also, I really like the boost ball rails. It would have been cool to see more of those used in Soul Valley as shortcuts, or for maybe even exploring like floating platforms or something higher up that we could get to, but only if we had the boost ball rail unlocked, just to give us a little bit more to actually do in the valley and explore. You look up and go, man, how do I get up there? That would be really cool to see what's up there. Those are just a couple of ideas of things they could have done different there. Of course, not having the Soul Valley at all probably would have been a good start, but Soul Valley has a total of 10 shrines to explore for upgrades, as well as destroyed Galactic Federation outposts for a few mech parts and other things, but you have to wait until basically endgame to attain all of those. Also, did I miss something? I thought this was an unknown planet. Why are there Galactic Federation posts here? Maybe someone can explain that to me. I clearly missed something there. Also, another nitpick here with Soul Valley. I know a lot of people don't like Soul Valley, so you probably won't mind me nitpicking Soul Valley to death, but I don't like the map of Soul Valley, like, at all. It has those, like, weird, like, hexagonal quadrants or whatever, and uncovering them all was a chore, because, you know, it's a big map that I can uncover, so I want to drive around and uncover it. Obviously, doing it all at once probably isn't a good idea, because you're going to be driving around in the desert forever anyways, but it just would have felt better if those little sections on the map were just bigger, or bigger for key locations, which would have encouraged me to, like, explore those bigger quadrants. I just don't know why there's so many segments to uncover anyways when most of the desert is just empty space. I just feel like the map is just sort of strange. It's just an odd way to do it. Also, the minimap not showing the undiscovered sections means you have to repeatedly open the map to figure out which way to go to unlock these little squares on the map. And that bothered me a lot. That's just a nitpick, like I said. Soul Valley is just a conundrum. It's just a very odd thing. It's so half-baked in a lot of ways, and I really don't get why. For one, it just completely fractures the whole interconnected idea of the Metroid games and how they were before. I'll talk more about this as I go. I've tried to write a lot of my thoughts down this time just to try to stay on track, but I feel like I'm kind of devolving into ranting, so I apologize. I'm just telling you how it is, telling you what I experienced. I'm not going to beat around the bush. This is just based on what I experienced and my opinions. Like, if it was just more to do in the desert than collect crystals, it would have been fine. I just don't get why they did so little there. Having the levels themselves be so isolated from each other and not even bother having them be, you know, spilling out into the desert in some way, where at least, like, when you're driving up to Icebelt, you could see, like, the wind and ice coming out of the front of the entrance, and maybe the wolves could be hanging out there, and you have to, like, fight them and make your way through them. Just something different of the desert to connect the levels. I just wish there was just some way they could have done that better. I would have just not had it at all, personally. I would have had all the levels interconnected, just like in Prime 1 in the previous games, and then I would have had, if you're going to have some kind of green crystal thing to collect, which is a very generic, boring name, by the way, have it be something you collect in the levels, like the artifacts. I'll definitely get more into that in a moment, but I'm gonna move on now. You have a radio button on the map, which is totally fine if you want a hint, but I've said this already, Miles gives you hints constantly in case you get lost somehow, even though the game is already crazy linear and it's literally a desert and the levels are in each of the corners of the map. I don't get why you need to be told where to go constantly. You can't get lost. Is that just me? Like, it's not just, he just tells you, hey, maybe you should do this once or twice. It's like all the time. If you're in the desert, you're going to hear it more than once. I'm just saying, maybe I'm going on a little too hard about that, but I don't like my hand being held in games. I don't mind a little bit of inferred idea of what to expect, but you can only tell me once, and that's okay. Now if I get confused, I can ask you, but I don't need it to be ad nauseum telling me over and over again. Like, just tell me one time, you should probably check out the volcano. I'll go, okay, thank you for the heads up. I don't want to hear it again. That's just me. Another part of Soul Valley is the mech parts, which is an in-game fetch quest, which isn't that big a deal. It's pretty easy. A couple of them, I think, are in some of the levels you have to return to get. I think there's one in the Great Mines, and there's one in Flare Pool. So you're going to be backtracking anyways, which I'll also talk about. So these mech parts being in these locations, I don't think is an issue. I just find that collecting them is just kind of basic in general and only serves one purpose, which is to open up the shield to the Chrono Tower. So kind of whatever about the mech parts. I don't really have much of a comment on those. It's just something you collect to get to the end of the game. I'll be honest, when you get the teleporter pod things that you stick to the mech parts to teleport them back to base, I thought, maybe this is just me, but I was like, oh, a teleporter thing, that means I can teleport between levels. I got my hopes up. Nope, it's for the mech parts. Now onto the green crystals. Green crystals are boring names. Obviously, there's all kinds of cool names for minerals and materials in Metroid Prime, like that you use the power bomb on or stuff like that. The super missile and whatnot. It'll be like, this thing is made out of this material and cannot be destroyed unless you have this thing. But then they're like, you know what? Green crystals. We're going to stick with that. I heard someone say that there is something else they refer to them as, like in a log or something in the mines, but I didn't catch it, I guess, because the entire game calls them green crystals over and over and over again. But that's just a nitpick. There are far too many green crystals to collect, even with the giant ones that you can break open, but you can't do those until the end of the game when you get the power bomb. So you're going to be collecting a lot of green crystals, like way too many. And I know a lot of people, for some reason, don't like the artifacts of Metroid Prime 1. Now, as a kid, I thought it was hard to find them, but I think a lot of people might be changing their tune now after collecting all these crystals. I just thought the easiest comparison I had was to Metroid Prime 1 with the artifacts, because I just recently played that over Thanksgiving break. I wish the green crystals were more like the artifacts. That's the easiest solution I could come up with, just with a little bit of refinement. Artifacts felt more appropriate for the setting and the story because they're Chozo artifacts, and you need them to activate a Chozo monolith, like sanctuary temple at the end game of the first game. There's only 12 of them, and they give you hints on how to find them. Like the last one I couldn't find in my recent playthrough was at the edge of Phendrana Drifts, and there's literally a place in the game called Phendrana's Edge. So just go there and look around and you'll find the artifact. So I like that those are straightforward and they encourage exploration in the actual levels rather than driving around a desert smashing into rocks for like 5 hours. So that would have been my way of approaching green crystals. Just make them like the artifacts. Just put a little spin on them, make them a little different, make them part of puzzles, something that you would use your psychic abilities on to get. That would have been really cool. Maybe find some lore items throughout the game that point you in the right direction. They could have used it to do a little bit more world building with the Lemorn and give some significance to collecting them, rather than we need you to help us get a seed to plant on another planet, and you need to collect a bunch of green crystals for that, even though the green crystals are kind of what screwed everything up in the first place. And like I said, you're already going to be backtracking for things, so them being like the artifacts wouldn't have been as much as a chore as collecting 10,000 crystals driving around in a desert. Boy, I'm a lot more into this. I've been writing my thoughts on this game for the last week, so I think everything's just sort of finally coming out, so bear with me. And the fact that the green crystals are so obnoxious to collect because they decided that the crystal clusters would be little tiny, like just a bunch of different sized crystals that you have to drive through, just make it one thing I drive through. 90% of the time, maybe this is player error, when you're driving through a cluster of green crystals in the desert, you're going to miss one of those little ones here and there. So you have to do a U-turn, drive right back through them. So almost every single green crystal, not almost every single crystal, but a lot of the green crystals, I'd have to U-turn it back and hit the little ones. I don't get why they had to make it that way. I just, like I said, for some reason, the green crystals are a series of clusters that aren't just something easy to drive through. Maybe that's me just, nitpicking again, but it got on my nerves, just having to drive through crystals. Oh, I missed a little tiny one. I don't know why you had to make a little tiny green crystal. I'll U-turn around and hit it again. So I'll hit every green crystal cluster 2-3 times to get them all. Now, as you collect the green crystals, you get different upgrades when you go back and turn them in. Of course, you have to go back to base camp to do this, rather than maybe having the turn-in be in front of the Chrono Tower. That would have been cool. Or some kind of special green crystal temple in the desert. That would have been cool too. Maybe as you get different green crystals, you go back to the green crystal temple in the desert, and then that would open different doors for different puzzles and different upgrades. That would have been cool. Make it its own location rather than just some little thing at base camp. I just now thought of that. That would have been really cool, actually. It wouldn't have made collecting them any better, but it would have given them some sort of a unique purpose rather than press button on console, thing glows, gives me upgrade. So you get the psychic beam, speed, and damage, which is actually pretty noticeable. It's probably the best upgrade aside from the last one. And then I think you get control beam speed and charge time, which I use the control beam barely. Obviously, you have to use it for some puzzles. I use it for some fights, some bosses, but it's kind of whatever. It's a decent upgrade, but I don't think it's all that important. And then you get green crystal scanner as an upgrade. That's your third upgrade. I feel like that should have been the second upgrade, or even the first. But having the psychic beam speed and damage is pretty solid. So having that first, I think, is definitely a must. But yeah, having one of the rewards be a green crystal scanner is kind of wild. They're not hard to find. It definitely simplifies your pathing in the desert rather than kind of driving around aimlessly. So there's that at least, but I don't know. I wish they would have done that differently. And the final reward is the Legacy Suit, which I think looks awesome. And it also has a built-in barrier that you can activate for 35 missiles. I just wish you could obtain a lot of these upgrades earlier. A lot of the time, I think you're mid to end game before you're able to collect enough green crystals, and I think it was really funny that I collected pretty much every green crystal you could on the map except for the big blocks that you need the power bomb for, and I was like a smidge away from maxing out the green crystals for like 100%. And I went and I used a power bomb on like one of those blocks for more green crystals, and that's all I needed for 100%. And I think if you collect technically every single one where you get like 200% green crystals, it unlocks stuff in the gallery or something like that. So there's that at least. Now that I've ranted about the green crystals, man, I wish they would have done this so different. Jeez Louise. Anyways, I'm going to talk about the backtracking a little bit, and backtracking early on is heavily discouraged because you basically need every upgrade to get like all of the levels cleared out, at least for the most part. Here and there, if you remember that you need the double jump for that, psychic thing and the Fury Green level, you can go back and get a missile expansion and you get your morph ball bombs. There's some things you can go back for there as well, but I think that's fine. I did that a few times where I knew I could get an upgrade, but there were a couple of times where I thought I could go back and I still couldn't get everything. So I don't know. It's kind of odd how they did that. It didn't feel very cohesive like in the first game. You can't unlock everything immediately in the first game either, but like you travel a certain distance through a level, you kill a boss or you get an upgrade, and then when you backtrack to where you need to go anyways, you realize, oh, there's a door I couldn't open before, you go through there. It just felt a little bit more cohesive to the environment. But if you don't want to drive across the desert back and forth just to get like a couple of upgrades, then I would suggest waiting on until later in the game. I think you can fully explore Ice Belt and Volt Forge once you get the Spider Ball, but you get the Spider Ball like in Ice Belt. So once you get that, then you can like open those up and finish those out. You must have the power bomb and the super missiles though to finish all of your backtracking, but you don't get till like at the very end of the game basically. And honestly, I don't mind the scout bots all that much, the ones you shoot with the thunder shot that tells you where everything is on the map you haven't collected. I don't hate that just because I don't mind the backtracking to begin with, and it's just more of an incentive to, 100% the items. I mean, I'm sure I could have found them either way. The only issue with that is the audio for upgrades, like when you're near one, isn't as pronounced as it is in the first game. It's a very light humming kind of sound. The first game, it's very loud, especially the closer you get to them, so it's pretty obvious that there's something behind this wall. I got to figure out how to get in there. But yeah, you use the scout bots to pin all of the missed upgrades on the map, and I think that's pretty cool. I don't really have an issue with that. The levels are already so small anyways. It's probably too much to give to the player, but there are a couple that may have been easy to miss. But in general, as long as you look around enough, you'll find where you need the upgrades or where they are, where they're hiding. Backtracking in general is pretty solid, though, once you get all the upgrades. A lot of the backtracking I did with the spider ball and stuff like that was pretty fun, actually. I liked doing those little puzzles and stuff with those upgrades. I like that. Especially the spider ball. I like the spider ball in this game. It just takes way too long to get it. One of the weird things about backtracking early on is you have to go back to Volt Forge to get the new Viola suit to hover across the lava and flare pool. And the suit only has like very minor improvements visually. I wish they would have gone in a different direction with that and maybe went from red to adding like purple plating like on the shoulders, like a combination. There's like purple accents and stuff they add, but kind of like the gravity suit in Metroid Prime, it looks basically the same as the Varia suit. It just has like blue shoulder plates and like legs and stuff. I wish they would have gone with that way of suit upgrades, like attaching colors to them. It's just red, but a little bit different. And like I said, another nitpick. A lot of nitpicks, I know, but that's just the way it is. Now, I believe I'll talk more about the backtracking, but in general, backtracking I think is fine. Like I said, though, you really have to wait for it to open up, especially since the lasso and the grapple are two different upgrades. So if you think you can use the lasso on something to pull yourself up somewhere, you can't. You have to wait to get the grapple to do that. Now, I'm going to talk about the scanning and how the color coding for the scans really got on my nerves. I really did. I really didn't want to be negative in this video. I just, it's just the way it is, y'all. So the scanning time also seems noticeably longer for some reason. And the fact that the color coding on the scans is just green or yellow is weird. So green scans are literally everywhere. You have like crates and trucks and doors and computers and debris or other parts of the environment, which makes them far, far too redundant. Every room you walk into and turn the visor on, you're going to have green scans absolutely everywhere. And a lot of the times they don't really tell you anything that matters. It's like, this is a computer that operates the windows or something. So if you like that kind of thing, I think that's fine. But after a while, it starts to overstay its welcome. And you're going to be spending a lot of time scanning these things anyways, which kind of destroys the pacing. It felt that way for me because I was just a little confused on how the scanning worked and what I need to be scanning for the logbook and whatnot, which is the issue with the color coding. And scanning all of these things is like almost information overload. It's just so much information for no reason. This is just one of the more perplexing changes in this game because the system of scanning things and color coding was like basically perfect in the other games. And I can't wrap my head around why it's changed. So like I said, the fact that there's so many things to scan, it's just really redundant, and it honestly made me tired of scanning. I stopped scanning the green stuff after a while because the environmental green scans don't mean anything for the logbook, except for specifically like the Lamorne tablets or the codices that you find like in Flarepool and stuff. Like you'll notice it'll have like a glow on it before you even open your scanner, or that it sticks out from the environment. You know, this is a lore piece. You need to scan that, but you know, everything else is just there for some reason. Now, if they reduce the amount of environmental scans by like 50% or more, it would have made what I'm scanning in the environment just feel more important, because I just feeling inclined to scan 1,000 computers for some reason really took away from my intrigue. Because I mean, what is computer 150 going to tell me that computer 100 didn't tell me? I don't know. It's just an odd approach to the whole system. And I don't think we should be able to scan everything in every level either. Like, I don't need to scan doors and crates in one level, go to the next level and be able to scan doors and crates again. Or trucks, or crates in general. It's just an odd thing. It's like, hey, this is a crate. It's like, okay, cool. A good example of an appropriate scan is like the big cannon in Flarepool. You walk into Flarepool and you go, whoa, what is that? I want to know what that is. That piqued my interest. So you are able to scan that. I think that's cool. Or a very important piece of the level that actually impacts its functionality, rather than every computer and every TV in every room. I don't know. I just think that's weird. That's all I'm saying. And obviously you need to scan certain things for the logbook, but the lack of color coding is an issue. I believe this game breaks it into interactable scans being yellow. So the NPCs are yellow because technically you can interact with them. And you have like elevator panels, consoles for maps, things like that. Early on, I assumed, even after scanning some things already, I assumed maybe that yellow scans are meant to be for logbook progression, because it's like, oh, you need to scan the NPCs for the logbook. They're yellow when you scan them. But that's not the case for everything in the game. And I don't think having different kind of colors from the previous games for scans is an issue. It's the lack of colors that's the issue. So they could have just simply kept unique logbook scans that you need for the logbook progression, keep them as red, make environmental scans just for environmental information as yellow, and anything you've already scanned is like a bluish gray or something. But the fact that everything is either yellow or green is strange, and honestly a downgrade from previous titles. And I just can't, like, if Retro's working on this game, there's no way I feel like they would have thought that was a good idea. Maybe I'm being a little too critical, but I don't get why you would change something that already worked fine before. That's just the only thing that really frustrates me a lot about this game is, and I'm not saying my idea of Metroid Prime is the perfect idea, or I'm a game developer or anything like that, but it's like when you look at something you really like, you know it works really well, and then you go and you see somebody change it and make it worse. I mean, is that not frustrating? Like, that's just strange to me. Why have two different colors for scanning, not delineate between what's important and what's not? I just don't get it. I just find it really strange. Like Metroid Prime 1, you could scan stuff, it would have a red square on it if you needed it for the logbook, and a yellow or a different sort of shade for something that's just for information, like this is a panel that could be broken with this sort of impact, or this is a machine that is churning some kind of phase on, or it just a little bit of world building. There's a lot of scanning in the space pirate levels in the first game, and that gives you a lot of background and a lot of more information on what the space pirates are actually doing. It actually gives you some depth to their motivation and their overall approach to building these facilities and what their experiments are. So, and I like that. And Metroid Prime doesn't throw all of that at you throughout the whole game. It's only in certain key moments. So as you explore, you'll fight some space pirates eventually, and then as you kill them all, you get to scan the room and all of their weird machinery and technology, and you get to learn about them. But in this game, it's just throwing stuff at you that I don't think is relevant. Like, this is a truck that uses power to move heavy stuff, and this computer is a computer that does computer things, and it just really got on my nerves. I just think the scanning in general is just a complete downgrade, and I have no idea why they thought they should change it. That's all. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, we can talk about the level design. And while I realize that Metroid games are linear to a degree, or for the most part, these levels are too linear, and every level is basically boiled down to hallways with a room or two to do a puzzle or something in, fight some enemies, you go down some elevators, and then you turn on some kind of machine or something, like turning on the power, and then you fight the boss and you leave. That's basically what the levels have been devolved into. And it could have worked if they just had more of the levels. You open up the map and look at these levels, they're extremely basic, and I think that's really unfortunate. Obviously, the fact that Soul Valley exists, they're squeezed into these corners of this game, so all of that space in the desert is just taking up all of the space that the levels could be using, and that's unfortunate. And the beauty of the first game, in my opinion, is that the world is somewhat like a labyrinth in a way, but it also feels like a puzzle that you solve by exploring it, and that's what made it so interesting to me and engaging. And as you learn about the world and obtain upgrades and apply them to the world, such as certain colored doors, the world opens up, evolves, and flows back into itself, which gives you a strong sense of progression. In comparison, the exploration in Metroid Prime 4 is on rails. Go here, talk to NPC, walk down some halls, turn on a machine, take some elevators, solve a puzzle or two, kill a boss, rinse and repeat, and I think it's just far too formulaic. It's also weird that the map just has no key to it. It doesn't have any way to tell you what doors mean what. In the first Metroid Prime game, it had a key. It would tell you if it's a door that hasn't been unlocked, that has been opened. And if you highlight the different rooms on the map, it would show the different doors in the room and what color they were. So that could tell you that, oh, I just got the ice beam. I need to go look back through my map. Oh, this room has a white door that I haven't opened yet, so you go back there. I don't feel like the map was implemented very well in that regard. It's just kind of there, and I really don't even think you need the map in this game because the levels are so easy to explore. Also, the level design, the biomes they used is too derivative of the first game, and while I like those levels in the first game, yet again, we have another jungle forest area, another ice tundra, a volcanic lava area, and a mine-like area. So in comparison, Fury Green is basically Talon Overworld, but Talon Overworld I think is far better. And then you have Vendrana Drifts in the first game, which is Ice Belt in this game. And then Flare Pool in this game is Magmore Caverns in the first game. And then the Great Mines in this game are the Phazon Mines in the first game. Now, Volt Forge stands out in a big way. I'll give it credit there. However, it's just a series of elevators and small rooms, and unfortunately, 1/3 of the level is the tutorial for Viola. But I really liked the boss there. I thought it was pretty cool. More about the levels here. I think Fury Green is a pretty strong opening level. I like its music especially and introduction to Vuros. But eventually it just sort of devolves into a glorified base camp green energy turn-in, and I think it's really underutilized. Volt Forge is visually striking. I like it a lot. The floating ball enemies are really annoying, but unfortunately it's just basically 3 towers with elevators, and I also liked the boss there. And like I said earlier, the backtracking in these areas are pretty solid. Maybe Fury Green not so much, but the other levels have really, really fun backtracking, in my opinion. Now for Ice Belt, I know a lot of people really like Ice Belt, and I can see why, especially with its opening sequence. It's very pretty. I like the big vista of the mountains, and then, you know, fighting the ice wolves is pretty cool. But once you get into Ice Belt, it wasn't my favorite, that's for sure. I didn't like searching for the TK codes or whatever they were called. It felt just kind of odd. On one hand, it's really cool to explore the level finally and actually like look for something rather than like a big machine, but you eventually do that anyways. Maybe it was just the time I was playing it. It just felt like it was slowing me down so much to just hunt through these rooms to find some weird little codes that I then do like a puzzle with. I don't know. I guess their implementation just felt kind of boring for some reason. I'm not really sure why at the time, but I like the idea. It's like, okay, I'm in Ice Belt. I'm ready to explore. Go find these codes, and it kind of takes a while if you're not really observant. So I don't know. I'm just kind of mixed on it more than anything. But I do like Tokabi, and eventually you get to find View there, the robot. I think they're pretty chill. I don't really have any issues with them. I like that they're just sort of, just like I said, very level-headed. And his line delivery was pretty cool for the most part, Tokabi. He's very calm, and he's not just, he's like not cartoonish. But I like View, like I said, because he's just this robot that talks like a robot. And it reminds me of like Ratchet and Clank and stuff like that. So I thought he was cool, and he was like the most functional NPC. He actually broke down doors for me and interacted with the environment with me, and I thought that was pretty cool. And the fact that he's a robot, his lines are very direct and concise and far less grating. Now, I do like Ice Belt to a degree. I'm not trying to say it's the worst level, because it's definitely not. I don't know. I think its introduction just felt very slow, and it just bored me a little bit. But once you turn the power on and the music really kicks in, and you can see all the ice melting, and you're like making your way out and stuff, that was really cool. I really liked that. And like I said, it has solid backtracking as well, so it was a good time. And speaking of View being a robot, it actually would have been really cool if all the NPCs in the game were robots. Had their own sort of way of speaking, but all sounded like View did, because I like the way he just spoke in general. And the fact that if they were robots, they could all have like different functions. I thought that would have been really cool. I mean, there's a big emphasis on machines in this game anyways, so that would have been kind of cool, like the Lamorne machines versus my machines. Like, that would have been an interesting approach, I think. There's a Ratchet and Clank game where you do this little mini game where Clank like commands different little robots to do things like make platforms and stuff. It would have been cool to see them do that with different machines working with Samus. And that way they would have done more of a service to me, except for just, you know, other than yapping in my ear the whole game. And Flare Pool is just a fire level. I think it's probably the least enjoyable level just in general. I like some aspects of it. I don't quite understand its purpose in the story, and I'll get more into that later. It just feels very shoehorned in and just sort of an odd location. It's not very all that interesting in general. It's just lava everywhere, and you fight a couple of different enemies. A new Cybot, I think, shows up. And I don't mind the NPCs in this area as much. They're kind of whatever, though. I don't hate them, but I don't know. I'll get more into the NPC stuff later. And I would say Flare Pool is just underwhelming. It's a lava level. It's fine. It's a lava level. I mean, there's not much else to really say about it. There's some cool things, like the boss battle, I think, is really solid. And it's more of a spectacle of a boss fight. It's a big lava worm thing. And I thought that was really cool. But other than that, Flare Pool doesn't really stand out to me in a lot of unique ways, unfortunately. But I actually usually like fire levels in games, but I think just in general, the fact that these are just the same kind of biomes that we're used to is what sort of had diminishing returns for me. Because I guess looking back at Metroid Prime 1, I don't really like Magmore Caverns all that much. It's one of the more linear parts of the game as well. And it has some cool set pieces, but Flare Pool in this game just really doesn't stand out to me aside from its boss. And also, there's a mini-boss fight against Silex, which I thought was alright. Now, interestingly enough, I know a lot of people don't like the Great Mines, but ironically, I thought it was the most convincing level with its linear design because it's a mine. So it makes the most sense to me, but unfortunately, the other levels were too linear as well, so I think this level suffered because of that. And that's not the only reason it's an issue, but when I got to the Great Mines, I was like, this makes sense. I like this. This is really cool. Unfortunately, all the other levels have their own issues being too linear, so this level just, I think, also suffered from diminishing returns. Obviously, a lot of people don't like this level because of the NPCs all accompanying you to it and pretending to do heroic sacrifices and all living in the end, so all of that it's just forced in for some reason, and it's really strange. It's such a weird tonal whiplash of like, yeah, we're gonna help Samus into the Great Mines, and then each of us are gonna valiantly sacrifice ourselves, and none of us die. Just kidding. Really strange. But I think the setting would have worked a lot better without them, obviously. And then, of course, another big nitpick for me in this level is that the Brute Grievers and the Omega Griever are essentially Elite and Omega Pirates from the first game, just reskinned. And I would say they're inferior to those as well. The Brutes even have, like, the same ground slam attack as the Elites in the first game. That's unfortunate, but the Elite and the Omega Pirate in the first game are just far superior enemies, in my opinion. I didn't mind the Omega Griever boss battle. I don't know if he was all that fun to fight against, but I like his design a lot, and his boss music is awesome, so there's that at least. And there's some people saying that's sort of like an homage to Aliens or something, with like having a hive kind of scenario going on, but I think the level would have worked a lot better without the NPCs, obviously. And the fact, like I said, all the other levels being so linear just didn't let this level shine like it could have. I do like that the fact that when you make noise in the mine, it attracts grievers. I think that's a nice touch, but I think it became far too repetitive. It happened all the time, especially backtracking, so it just kind of overstayed its welcome. But other than that, Great Mines, I think, is a solid level, actually. I think it's probably the best level. Not visually. I mean, it's a mine. It doesn't, like, really stand out visually, but I liked its design. I would say probably Fury Green or Volt Forge is probably the best-looking level. The first three levels are fine. Flare Pool is the one I just really don't like. So it's hard to really compare them because they all kind of feel the same. But I guess it's what you prefer. Do you prefer lightning or fire or ice or plants or living in a mine? Take your pick. And like I said, I do like backtracking in this level, especially when you get all the upgrades and you can really put them to use, like the spider ball and stuff. That's a lot of fun. It really opened the levels up a bit more and added some puzzles to them, and I thought that was pretty cool. So while a lot of the levels are kind of whatever to begin with, I think they become just more enjoyable as you're able to backtrack through them, even if it's just a little bit. And basically to backtrack like completely, I believe you need at least the grapple, the spider ball, the thunder shot, and maybe the super missile for Flare Pool. So you really need to have all those to finish all your backtracking. Anyways, I'm still on mechanics, by the way. This is a lot to encapsulate. I'm doing my best here, but I think we're now on to the end game, which is where we go to the Chrono Tower after, getting all the teleporter keys and getting all the mech parts as well. And I believe you also need all the green crystals. I don't remember, but the Silex fight in the Chrono Tower was pretty cool, but unfortunately you have all of the NPCs in the fight with you, which was super annoying. If they just made it to where you didn't have to revive them, then they didn't have health bars in the boss fight, it would have been fine. But they kept falling down, and I kept having to revive them, which took my attention away from the boss, which is supposed to be the focus of a boss fight, is the boss. And I just don't think it was implemented very well to have them there. They're just in the way, and I just don't really like them in general. Just as a concept, in their implementation is just bad. I just don't like the NPCs. After doing everything in the game and having all of them in the game, the fact that they have to put them all in the final boss fight, just, I think, was the final nail in the coffin for the NPCs. And like I said, I didn't mind a couple of them. I didn't mind them talking every once in a while. I don't think Miles was all that horrible like everyone was saying early on. When you first meet him, he's corny, he's a little goofy, and then by the time you get to base camp, which is what, like 10 minutes, it's not that big a deal. But the fact that from then on he never shuts up, that's the biggest sin when it comes to Miles. And I wish they would just not be in the way. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So the fact that I had to deal with all of this throughout the whole game, and then when I get to the final boss fight, which has been just so vaguely set up to begin with, these people have to be standing around me and yapping and talking and acting like they know everything, telling Samus how to do stuff and asking her questions, and then they're in the boss fight and falling over from his attacks and have to go res them. It was a huge problem for me in the final fight. I don't think they belonged there at all. Like I said, if they didn't have health bars, or I didn't have to waste my time rezzing them, it would have been okay. Like, they had some dialogue like, look out, and you know, it could have worked, but it was just done in the most surface level way possible. Let's just throw the NPCs in the fight with Samus and make them a freaking chore and to detract away from the spectacle of the fight. It's just antithetical to what a boss fight should be, in my opinion. I'm sure there are games that have systems like this with NPCs helping you in the fight, but this is just the most like intrusive way to do it. Anyways, more about Sylix and the actual boss. I like the spectacle of it if it wasn't so distracted by the NPCs, but his mechanics look pretty cool. They just become a little repetitive. He has these like tentacles that come out. You need to shoot them and then like pull them off, and then he turns into like dragon tentacles, and then you shoot those enough to then actually like be able to damage him directly, and then it just rinse and repeats. I think the dragon has change element, which I didn't know if that was inferring I should use a specific element against them or not. It didn't seem to really matter because the thunder shot one is just so good. You just charge that thing up and let it go, and it just auto targets the tentacle heads and just blows everything up. So it's a good way to approach it. But you get done with the first phase, which I think is fine. It's ruined by the NPCs, but you go into like a wormhole battle against him where you need to like dodge these like discs he shoots at you, and you're both flying through this wormhole. I think that was okay. It looked pretty cool. It reminded me of like, was it Crash Bandicoot Warped or something? There's a boss battle where you fight Neo Cortex or some other boss when you're flying through a wormhole like that and you have to dodge stuff. I can't remember which one that was. If you can remind me, that'd be great. But very reminiscent of something like that. I didn't hate that part, but you get through the wormhole fight and then you end up in this like cosmic void arena thing to fight him. I thought that was really cool. It looked awesome. I really liked what they did with that. His boss fight in general is okay. That's the best part of the fight, I think, is the third phase. He goes into, I think, to his lockjaw mode. He's like stealing energy tanks from you. That was very different. And then he does this like big channeled attack where you have to essentially use the control beam to hit him because it sucks in all your shots and missiles. So you use the control beam to hit him to interrupt that. And then eventually you beat him. And then you come back out of the wormhole. And then that's the fight. Once you defeat him, he falls into the void, and then you're like, all right, we're back. We're getting on the master teleporter. And then Sylix appears through another rift, and then the Federation troops literally rush him and hold him physically, and they yell at you to leave. They say, get out of here, and all their helmets open up to show their faces, trying to add some sort of emotional weight to the scene, which wasn't earned at all in this game. The NPCs have like no emotional weight in this game at all. Like, they're there, they're people, they have things they talk about, likes and dislikes, whatnot here and there, but it's only in passing. And then they have the nerve to pretend kill them all in the Great Mines, and then have them all sacrifice themselves at the end again, and then tell Samus to leave. So she does. You leave. You leave them behind. What in the world? Also, the game presents a choice, quote unquote, of pressing the teleporter button, but if you wait too long, it just gives you a game over screen, which then reloads you back to the wormhole section of the boss fight. How does that make sense? Is that not weird? But I'm really glad I decided to just hit the button because it would have been the only game over for my entire playthrough. Because I was literally playing it and was like, if I don't hit this, maybe something different will happen. And I'm like, no, I just need to hit it. And I did. And then I looked it up. What happens if I don't hit the button? And everybody was like, you just get game overed. So, and even if they're leaving the story open-ended, this seems, I think, pretty out of character for Samus, and the emotional weight of the situation wasn't earned at all. It just felt very forced. Now, once Samus uses the Master Teleporter, she arrives on a barren planet, plants the Lamorne seed or memory seed or whatever it's called. A sapling grows up out of the ground. She puts Tokabi's medallion on a branch. Then it cuts to black. If I'm not mistaken, the fact that I got 100% item completion is what gives you this cutscene at the end. If you can confirm that for me, I'd appreciate it. I think if you get 100% scans and completion, or sorry, 100% scans and items, she takes her helmet off in that cutscene. I don't know. But the fact that I only missed literally one scan in the game, I don't think I'm going to go back and get it, to be honest. It was the Carvex Vine, which I swear to God I scanned, but I must have just scanned the weak point on it, which doesn't count as the Vine scan. That's crazy. But anyways, I didn't really like the whole way the game ended personally. I just think in general, a lot of the stuff in the final boss fight just felt so out of place and forced. I like the ending cutscene. It looks really good. The cutscene in this game looks great. I really liked how it looked, but it could have been so much more somber and impactful if it was just Samus alone doing this. I don't know why that is to me, but or just have the NPCs just be more approachable and easier to emotionally connect with. It just wasn't there. It wasn't fleshed out enough for me for any of this at the end to make sense or be acceptable. And that's it for the mechanics. I know I went on forever about that, but it's like the huge like crux of my problems with this game. Is there's so many elements that just don't come to fruition like I think they could have. It's like they picked something to add to the game, they took it like 20% into it, and then they said that's enough for that mechanic, let's just do something else. And it just, they compounded on top of each other. Where the longer I played the game, the more egregious it started to feel that it's just really all you could do. And the fact that they take mechanics in backwards directions, like the scanning and stuff, it's really perplexing. And I know I've been kind of ranting and getting kind of worked up about this, but I'm just really passionate about this, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around it all, I guess. And now that we're done with mechanics, I'll continue speaking about my final thoughts here in a moment. But after mechanics, we have the story, which I guess I won't try to spoil too much of, but just general impressions is that we're the chosen one again. The Lamorne want us to preserve their history by taking a seed from the great tree and plant it on a different planet. I also think the inclusion of Silex with the story felt very forced and didn't pay off in the end, at least for me. I know he was in like Federation Force or something like that, and I didn't play any of those games in like Metroid Hunters or whatever that was called. I didn't play those games. I'm not like crazy familiar with Silex, but his inclusion in this story just felt like there were two stories happening at the same time, and they didn't go anywhere with either one of them. And while I guess they did set up the series for potential continuation, but I mean, only time will tell if that's true or not. I'm not. I mean, we might not get another Metroid Prime game. I mean, who knows? Anyways, the Lamorne are interesting at first, and I just felt like most of the story wasn't fleshed out enough or tied into the environment in a meaningful way. It's very surface level, which is fine to a degree, but it's just constantly implied that what we're doing is so important, but what's delivered feels almost at conflict with itself at times. And overall, the story is just very hit or miss for me. Maybe with the next installment, they can clean it up some, but for first impression's sake, I think they could have done more. And just a basic breakdown of some of that is like you show up to help at the very beginning of the game, which I quite like the opening of the game. I will say that. I should have said that a long time ago, but you show up to help the Galactic Federation at the beginning. Silex has showed up with space pirates, which you never fight again. You only fight them at the beginning of the game, which sucks. And then along with Metroids, which now have the ability to infect other life forms. This is never explained. Actually, you never see another Metroid for the entire game. It's another part of the story and the implementation of things that just kind of perplexes me. Because you scan bosses, and bosses apparently have been infected by Metroid. How? When? Why? on this random strange planet out in the middle of nowhere? I don't know. It just happened. They just tell you it happened, so it happened. Why can't we fight Metroids? Why isn't there a source of the Metroids on this planet? Why aren't there Metroids in the final boss fight with Silex? A lot of strange stuff going on here. Anyways, artifact falls over. You teleport to like a psychic dimension or to the Chrono Tower or whatever. You meet the Lemorn, and basically the Lemorn want your help to preserve their history. You need to obtain 5 teleporter keys from across the world so you can power the Master Teleporter and take a seat to another planet. Now this is sort of the confusing part for me. So the Lemorn discovered psychic abilities when one of them was born with one? Question mark. They sought to manifest these crystals and stop using up the finite resources of the planet, Viros, which is confusing because aren't they in Flare Pool and the Great Mines, like using up the resources, such as the green crystals, to create green rain for some reason? Because that's what leads to the Great Tragedy, is that the green energy corrupts their psychic crystals and turns them into grievers. This is just my initial understanding of it. Obviously, there are logs and stuff that you can read that honestly don't give you a lot of information. In some ways they do, but otherwise they just say like, I am this Lemorn that did this thing. So it just feels contradicting of how the machine era and the psychic era played into each other. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Not the end of the world, but I don't know. It felt just a little off. And for the Federation NPCs, I think they have almost no impact on the story at all whatsoever. They're just stranded there like you are. They do assist you in some of the levels by pointing out various, obvious things that you should do or things you would have thought of yourself. So there's that. I really appreciate them doing that for me. They all accompany you in the Great Mines, but they're only there to force an emotional connection by having them all sacrifice themselves. None of them die, so it's completely irrelevant, so it's a bait and switch. And more about the Lemorn. They have specific statues throughout the world that projects like a Lemorn that explains what happened to them before you arrived. They had the Great Tragedy happen, which turned them into grievers. So 13 Lemorn held up inside the Chrono Tower to protect the Great Teleporter from grievers, I guess. They used it to send 12 of the 13 Lemorn out into the reaches of space to look for you, the Chosen One. How come we're always the Chosen One? I want to know that. But also, I wish they would go a different direction with it. It dilutes the previous stories if we're always the Chosen One. I find it weird, too, that maybe I missed something, but if 12 Lemorn were sent to far reaches of space to find us, where's the last one? Where's the 13th one? Is he not in the tower? I don't remember seeing him. Maybe he is, and I missed it. I don't know. So while the story, it doesn't need to be the most complex thing ever. The story in the first game is very surface level as well, but it's far more interesting because it's pieced together in such a way that the story is a mystery, not that I'm being explained a million things by NPCs and projections and stuff like that. You read lore about from the Chozo side of things in the first game and from the Space Pirate side of things, the two influences that they have on the planet, or the history of the Chozo and why they're all gone, and what the Phazon is, and what the worm is that came from space and created the crater. It's a lot more observational storytelling. It allows you, the player, to investigate and scan the environment as you explore, to piece it together and really think about it as you go. This game just throws all this information at you, and I don't think it amounts to anything, honestly. And in some ways it's interesting. In some ways, it just kind of leaves all of these holes of like Silex and the Metroids being a part of all this and him being in just some healing pod in the Chrono Tower. I just think it's just, for me, it's all over the place. And I much prefer the slow way of the first game's approach of it just being a little piece by piece thing that by the end of the game, you understand what's going on. It doesn't need to be complex. It just needs to be fleshed out in a way that I know exactly what's going on. Now, it's okay to have ambiguity sometimes too. Of course, if they're setting up for another Metroid Prime game, that's fine. But I think they should have given a little bit more actual payoff to this story, because it almost all amounts to nothing other than us planting the seed on another planet. But then that's it. Game over. That's all there is. And maybe I'm going a little too hard on the story, but I just felt like, I don't know, it just didn't come together for me. That's all. Now that I've talked about all that, we're talking about the performance just a little bit. I think the performance is great on the standard Switch. It's smooth, 60 FPS, so I have no complaints there. There aren't very long loading screens between the desert and base camp. which wouldn't have been that big a deal if I didn't have to go there so many times for no reason. And the settings are acceptable. I think there's some decent, accessibility settings. And I just wish I could specifically turn off the hint system. That's all I wish was there. It's honestly egregious that it's not there. And you can turn off speech, volume, and subtitles, but I could still see the subtitles for hints for some reason. I didn't want the hints to be there at all because was always very obnoxious that I needed to be told what to do over and over again. I mean, I thought it was always very obvious of what to do, and they were just far too frequent. The hints in Metroid Prime 1 were far less frequent and less intrusive. They also behave as an additional function of Samus's suit. So it'd be like a blinking thing would show up, and then you would click your map button, and then it would put a highlight on a room somewhere, like it does in this game for the teleporter keys. And then that's it. And it didn't happen all the time. Like the hint system in the first game, it could take a good long while for it to finally pop up if you were lost. But if I was just backtracking or something, it would tell me eventually, hey, there's some weird readings somewhere. You need to go there and check this out. I'll go, okay, mark it on my map. And no one's talking to me and telling me what to do. It's just that I'm going to put this thing on your map. I go, thank you, suit or whatever. And then I move on. But just the ad nauseum hints is a problem, a huge problem. And I just wish I could turn it off, that's all. And of course, on the main menu, you have the gallery, which you can look through concept arts and cutscenes related to the Silex little backstory they did, which is tied to your progression in the game. I think that's fine. It's always good to see that, so no problems there. So my closing thoughts, just in general, is that it makes a pretty strong first impression. However, the critiques that I have with this game continue to distract me throughout my experience. So by the end of the game, I was just tired of it. It has great bones, but almost every aspect, aside from the visuals and sound design, feel undercooked and left with so much potential. And like I said at the beginning of the video, if you love this game and these critiques don't bother you at all, I think that's great. I'm glad that you enjoy it. I'm not trying to suck the fun out of it for you or anybody else. I have no issues with that whatsoever. If you haven't played a Metroid Prime game before, I recommend you try it for yourself and form your own opinion. And if you prefer to start from the beginning, I highly recommend Metroid Prime Remastered. So in closing, even with my measured expectations, I feel as though Metroid Prime 4 played it far too safe when it could have been so much more. Instead, it gives me the strong impression that they opted for mass appeal over everything. Hopefully, going forward, they're able to execute a more cohesive vision of what Metroid Prime is, what its strengths are, and why the first 3 Metroid Prime games captivated us, even with their flaws. Now, that's my critiques of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, the overview and breakdown of all the aspects based on my personal experience. While I did have some fun with this game, it just eventually just kind of got on my nerves. Just the idea of a lot of these systems not being executed, I think was just the most distracting, glaring issue with this game. And the fact that there are so many of them is a big issue. Like I said, if you had a lot of fun with this game, I think that's great. So more power to you. Anyways, I think that's all I'll say now. I really appreciate you watching if you made it this far. I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments if you agree or disagree with me or have anything to add. I'd really appreciate that. And like I said, please just be respectful to me and to others while doing so. And I'll have some links to my socials in the description. And if you'd like to support my channel, hit subscribe, leave a like, comment, and share the video. I'd really appreciate that. And like I said, I'll do videos like this on occasion. I do mostly horror games and whatnot. But I thank you for watching my video, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And I think that's all I have to say about it. So thanks for hanging out with me. And don't forget...